This first photograph was rediscovered a few years ago by David Fenster, and he sent it to me, not saying anything, and said, "What do you think?" knowing that this was something we had been looking for a long time. This photograph was taken in December 1899. And the reason it's important to us is because we have some people in here that are crucial in our early history. This is the celebration of the opening of Vijay, Irani and Company, a supply depot in the camp area, Nugger. Vijay Irani was the maternal grandfather of Goher and Katie and Franny, Irani, who just died. That is him right here. Working for him were these two men here. This is Kikusui, Sarosh Irani, and this is another Kikusui Irani. They were brothers-in-law. This one married the sister. This one married Gulnur, the sister of this Kikusui. And this Kikusui's wife was Gulmai. So now that we're 30 seconds into the program, you must be sufficiently confused with names. So just imagine how many Kikusuis there were in the life of Meherabad through the years. He started running out of nicknames by the end. So when we had the legacy program, there was Keki Desai, Kikusui Keki Desai, and then there was Kikusui Nalawala, who was Keka. And there was Kaku, and then anyway, this one becomes, we know him as Concept Kikusui. And he was in the middle in his family. Strong personality, which was good because he was in the middle of the Orthodox Zoroastrian community, and his family that was totally dedicated to Meherabad and Upasi Maharaj. And as you might know, the Zoroastrian community was adamantly opposed to both of them in general. Though many of the followers of Baba and Upasi Maharaj were Zoroastrians. This Kikusui, good man, philanthropist, but was adamantly opposed to Meherabad his whole life. He had one son, Sarosh. That is our Sarosh, one of the close disciples of Meherabad. This Kikusui had two sons, Rustam and Adi, who were also close disciples of Meherabad. So they were cousins, and they were also the early disciples of Meherabad. Let's go to the next photograph. This is a closer look at them here and here. So you see Kikusui, he's known as Kikusui Elder, Sarosh's father, and this is, we call him Concept Kikusui. And this is Vijay Irani. Okay, there's another reason this photograph is important. Let's go back to the original. And that's because you see this person sitting here. And this was the very important reason we wanted to find a photograph like this. For years, we've been looking for one photograph. Even once I met this man's great nephew in Ahmednagar and asked him, "Do you have any photographs of your uncle?" He said, no photographs allowed. He was a wali. Who are we speaking of? Gilori Shah. Gilori Shah, whose tomb is out in the front. This is the only photograph we know of that shows him. He's sitting on the end. He's also an honored guest, along with these English people. Here is Gilori Shah, an honored guest. But there are certain factors here that tell us why this is Gilori Shah, why we are sure it is him, though we don't see any names here. No identifying names in this photograph, except the ones that we know. And why is that Gilori Shah? Let's go to the third photograph. This is a close-up. So he looks like a standard Muslim fakir. Kind of. Why does he have the Vaishnavite tilak on his forehead if he's a Muslim fakir? We know from the history that he had a Hindu master in central India when he was very young, who taught him advanced yoga not for the average people, which he continued apparently practicing. Why is he honored along with the English guests? Because, as you might know, he was a member of the household, of the royal household of Queen Victoria, serving there until he retired. After he retired, he came and settled in Ahmednagar. Why Ahmednagar? Because of this. I could go on for half an hour on Gilroy Shaw, but we won't see any other photographs then. I just wanted you to see this. We thought this was just something remarkable when we finally got an image of him. He was caught inadvertently in a photograph, to our great fortune. All right, next one. This is Meherabad, our Baba, at around the same time, 1899, with his sister Franny, who died, and his brother Jamshed, who died. And of course, both of them are on the memorial tower. As is, by the way, concept Kikusui. We'll go to the next image. This is one of the first photographs, possibly the first photograph we have of Meherabad after God realization. These are Persian books here, apparently. This is what Mani said. Shireen Mai was very happy because this man, Behramji, had come to Meherabad to learn Persian. Although he was a native Persian, he had not studied the language. So to learn reading and writing, he came to Meherabad. The baby that Behramji is holding is Baba's youngest brother, Adi. And based upon the size of this baby, we know it is sometime in the early part of 1915. Shireen Mai was very happy. She thought, now Meherabad is coming out of the catatonic stupor, the spell that Babajan had put on him over a year previous. Let's go to the next image. This is the way Meherabad looked. Meherabadji looked about a year or two later after that. Next image. In 1918, what happened is Behram became a business partner with Meherabad. So Behramji and Meherabadji were business partners, and all of this had to do with the families encouraging Meherabad to become more normal after the incident with Babajan. So in August of 1918, they rented a space in Kasba Pet section of Pune. And next to that space, they set up this thing. Here, I don't know if you can read this, Shri Upasni Ashram. Shri Upasni Ashram. So this was a temple, a little temple set up right next to, what was the business? A toddy shop. Meherabad's father had done business with tea shops and toddy shops. So he would go to these places of business and work, doing usually the washing of the utensils and encouraging and reciting poetry to the customers and encouraging them not to drink so much. But the funny thing is, wherever he was, business always improved. This is Behramji here. This is a man nicknamed Nervous. He was Khordad Farhad Irani, another Irani who, according to Bailey's diary, heard of Meherabad in Calcutta, where he was working with a theatrical group, and immediately came back to become a disciple. This is now at least 1919. We're assuming this is 1919. This is the brother of this man here. Who is this? This is Gustaji. Gustaji was one of the first disciples of Baba, the most important early disciple of Baba. He was sent to Baba in December 1918 by Upasli Maharaj. He was a disciple of Sai Baba, went to Upasli Maharaj when Sai Baba dropped his body, and a few months later, Upasli Maharaj sent him to Merwan, who made him serve Babajan for some months. Naturally, highly spiritually inspired person, very pure person. So this is Adi, nicknamed Slamson by Baba, because there were many Adis, Ardashurs Adis. There were many of those also. So he also had a nickname. Because there was now, coming into the picture soon, there would be Adi K. Irani, known as Adi Sr., and Baba's little brother, the baby Adi Jr. And then his nickname was Slamson. This is another Kodadad. His nickname was Kodu, but he would be here at Meherabad nicknamed Sailor, because he was big and strong, and he was given the work of carrying water because there were no pipelines in those days. So water had to be delivered by hand to all the places around Meherabad, and he was part of the water carrying team. This is Syed Sahib, one of the early Muslim disciples, who was introduced to Merwan. Here's Baba, by the way, if you didn't see him. Introduced to Merwan by Babajan. And this is Jamshed, Baba's elder brother. In this area, Kasbapet, many people came to meet Baba. You may have heard, of course, you've heard of Vishnu. Vishnu was a 15-year-old boy at the time who lived across the street. He came here one day to have Baba's darshan, and Baba drew him in. We won't get distracted with more stories, but as a 15-year-old boy, he became a disciple of Baba's. His mother also, at that time. This is now 1918, 1919. How early their connection is. Arjun Supekar had a little tobacco stall in that area. And Baba would go and sit with him and chew tobacco and talk to him. He also became one of the close early disciples. Let's go to the next image. And this is a group. This photograph was probably taken at the home of Munshi Rahim Hira. He is. It may have been his birthday or some occasion, but he's garlanded, so there's some special occasion here. That was also in Pune. Munshi was also a spiritually inclined person who was dumbstruck the first time he saw Merwan. This is now 1920. We know that because Abdul Ghani, Baba's childhood friend, became reacquainted with him here. I can quickly go through some of these names. I wanted to relate it to you a little bit because more than half of these are probably on the memorial tower, these names. You'll see many of the people in the early photographs on the memorial tower because naturally many of them died before Baba passed away. But why would these people gather? Because Baba would have these meetings, and the habit was that he would recite poetry. He would recite Hafiz by heart, Rumi, other great Persian poets in the Persian language, and he could translate into any of the Indian vernacular languages. Baba spoke fluently and wrote 7 languages. So I'll go through and just give you names of a few of these people. They're fascinating. Of course, Dr. Ghani, he's there on the Memorial Tower. You know him. This is Syed Jamadar. He's on the Memorial Tower. This is not Syed Jamadar. This is Syed Jamadar. This is Kak Saheb, Asar Saheb. His nom de plume was Kak Saheb. He was one of Baba's close early disciples. Also introduced to Baba by Babajan. great poet, Syed Jamadar. These three men are on their names are on the tower. Munshi, four men are on the tower. This man, although he didn't stick with Baba, his name is there. This man, Asar Saheb, this boy's name is Madhav. During the new life, Madhav was the caretaker of Meherabad for some time. This man was in Manzli Meme, Maria. This is Bailey, Baba's notorious, infamous childhood friend, also a disciple. This is Syed Saheb here. And Syed Saheb, no, where am I? Yeah, Syed Saheb here, right behind Munshi. Syed Saheb is the one who eventually told Munshi about Baba. Syed Saheb was, as I said, introduced to Meherabad by Baba Jan. She would praise him, and they were wondering who this was, so when he was there, the connections were made. Syed Saheb is the one who came up with the suggestion that Meherabad be called Meher Baba. Around this time. This is Masaji, another Rustam, another very common name. So this is Baba's, this is Shireen, my sister Pila Masi to Baba, her husband Masaji. He's known as Masaji. And it is his grave there at the base of the memorial tower that inspired the whole construction of the memorial tower. This is Kondiram, early disciple from Cosmopet, who died about 1927. Bapu Gante, who took his family and settled in Arangaon and lived till the end of his life there. And you don't hear much of him beyond the early history. Again, this is Slamson, Ustaji's brother, Vital Bokri. These people, these are all on the memorial tower. This is Chiman Chaudhry, disciple of Upasi Maharaj, who was directed to follow Baba. This is Yeshwant Rao. But okay, we know him because he was the close disciple of Upasi Maharaj, who was given the responsibility of being Baba's personal attendant whenever he was in Sakuri in those early years. And he was really the link between Upasi Maharaj. He was the link between the Sakuri ashram and Baba, always. The reason Baba came back there in the 50s even, after so many years, was to go to his housewarming. But he was also a close disciple of Baba's. Very good man. This is Arjun Supikar, who died late in 1926. This is a good photograph of him. He was one of the early disciples close to Baba, an illiterate, low-caste man who was so dedicated that here at Meherabad, Baba made him the director of education. And he did, because of his exemplary obedience and dedication. This is a man named Balatambat right here, also one of the early disciples. You very rarely hear anything about him because he was, of all the disciples of Baba, he was most successful of achieving doing nothing at all. By Baba's order. He worked, of course, during the early days of the ashram. He was here. He was always here. From 1925, he was here. But in 1929, Baba put him on silence, and he remained on silence for the rest of his life, and he died here at Meherabad after Baba dropped the body. And he cooked for himself. He did nothing. He lived in a little small, very small room in the old bungalow. All of those years, where Baba used to grind grain at one time. That was his room. He's not on the memorial tower because he died after Baba. He doesn't have a grave here because he was a Hindu. He was cremated. And people know very little about him, but here's the example of somebody. You know, in the discourses where Baba explains, there are 6 ways of getting rid of sanskars, and one of them is they just wear out by doing nothing. This is what you see. This is the prescription that the master has given to this particular patient for the endgame. This is what he did. By the way, many of these people, the Hindus, were cremated in this Nullah, that low spot, which is right here on this side of the Pilgrim Center. So that's really also archival ground, right here, although we don't look at it as such. Until the cremation platform was built, they were all done there. But the problem is, if somebody died during monsoon, you couldn't do the cremation in the Nullah, which was the habit. Next image, please. This is the photograph taken probably in 1923 of Concept Kikusui, his wife Gulmai, their daughters Piroja and Dolly. They are the ones, I'm not going to get into the story because this, we could go on and on, this could go on for hours, but they are the ones who eventually gave this property, Meherabad, to Baba. At around this time, within a year of this time, Baba had come here and taken use of this property. Gilroy Shah had been pestering them for a piece of this property for 4 years. First, he was this is the way these people work. They have close connections. Concept Kikusui was not what you would call a spiritually inclined person, but he was dedicated to his family, and his wife could do nothing other than be spiritually inclined because she was just restlessly despondent with the world. So their 2 sons are not in this photograph because this is probably taken during Manzalimim time. So they're with Baba. So this was during that year when Gilroy Shah finally was given permission to have his property here. He used to say, "You have that property at Arangan. It's good enough for somebody like me. I don't need much, just enough to lie down, maybe a little more." At that time, he would say, "I want to retire now. I'm old. I need to retire. I just need enough space to lie down." Next, please. This is one of my favorite This is my favorite photograph of these 2 women. This is the only one we have of them being so friendly together. This is Baba's mother, Shireen Mai, and Gulmai, whom Baba called his spiritual mother. This is really nice of them looking so friendly with each other, but really speaking, Shireen Mai did not like, she was extremely jealous that Baba should call Gulmai his spiritual mother. So she gave Gulmai a lot of trouble in life. Baba even more than once apologized to Gulmai for the trouble she had to suffer by his mother's hands. But Gulmai was a spiritual personality, so she suffered. She really did suffer in life. Next image, please. This is Gulmai's sister, Suna. So we know her as Suna Masi because she was Adi Rustam Dali Piroja's Masi, that is, mother's sister. She married a man named Kikusui. We know him as Kikusui Massa. This is his sister, and this is their daughter. Can we see the bottom of the photograph? This is their daughter, Khorshid. That's the early connection. These people are all deeply dedicated, except this one. These 3 deeply spiritually inclined, absolutely dedicated to Baba. When Babajan, Khorshid said, when they first met Babajan greeted Sunamasi like she was a long-lost old friend. Picked her out of the crowd and just... Kikusui Massa was spiritually inclined. He heard of the Chila Nashini, that Sufi practice of penance to win your wish and a favor from God. So he tried to do it in an apartment, in their apartment in Bombay. So he drew a circle in the... It's not the same as a jungle, but, you know, urban jungle. And he had some success with it. I don't know how many days he lasted without eating, drinking, sleeping, but he lasted a long time. It's a long story, but his wish was fulfilled by having Khorshid be born to them. In 1924, when Baba was back in Bombay after he had been in Ahmednagar, Kikusui Massa brought him a box of jewelry that he had made for Khorshid. He was a jeweler and a very fine jeweler, and his work had, anybody who knew the jewelry knew that it was his work. It had signature of his personality. So he presented this, which was worth maybe 3 lakhs at the time, to Baba for his use. Baba opened up the box and looked at it and said, "Beautiful, this work is beautiful, beautiful." He said, "But what am I going to do with this stuff?" He said, "Go and sell it, bring the money, and we'll use it. But I don't need jewelry. But I want that box. Give me that steel box. That's nice. I want that box." It was a locking box. So that's what he did. Now what happened is, as that jewelry was sold in Bombay, Kikusui Massa's family heard about it and realized in the market that that was his jewelry he was hawking to give money to Meherabad. And that was the beginning of the torture of the end of his life. Anyway, the box came back to Baba. And what did he use that box for? When he started writing his secret book after keeping silence, that was the box, the steel box that he kept his book in. And he could lock it, and that key would be kept around his neck on a string. Next image, please.
Yeah, where's the box now?
We have the box, we don't have the contents. The box we have, we don't have the contents. This is the wedding of Mera's sister Franny and Rustam in Ahmednagar that happened May 9th, 1923. This is in front of what was then the Parsi Agyari, Zoroastrian fire temple there in Ahmednagar. This is a broad look. Let's go to the next image because there are some people in here you'll be interested in looking at. Can you get that a little larger? Okay, so down a little bit. That's all we get. Good. Okay, this is Rustam and Franny. This is Daulat Mai, Franny's mother, also close disciple of Baba's, and some of her family over here. This, however, is Katie and Goher's elder sister, Silla. And I believe this is Katie right here. This is Baba's younger brother, Adi. And there are some Sarosh sisters are in here, other people are in here. Let's go to the next image. It's more important to see that. Okay, down a little bit. Here's Kikusui Massa here. Concept is here, I think. Shireen Mai is here. And next to Shireen Mai is her niece. That means Pilamasi's daughter, Naja, one of the important early disciples of Baba. This is Sunamasi. She was quite short. Behind Piroja, behind Dolly. No, this is Dolly here. This is Piroja. Shireen Mai's brother Dinsha had a daughter also named Khorshid. So in our history, we refer to her as Big Khorshid. She was also one of the people in the in the women's ashram. And this is our small Khorshid here. You see how big she is? Within 1 year, she is a disciple in the ashram of Baba. This is age 13. At 14 years old, she became a disciple and was one of the ashram's residents living that life of strict discipline. So here's, again, this is Adi Jr., and this is Dolly and Piroja, the daughters. And who is this? This is Mani. And this is Goher here. Mani and Goher. Next image. You won't see any of the men mandali here, of course. They were not attending the function itself. There was so much animosity and antagonism towards Meher Baba from the Orthodox Zoroastrians that Baba decided to lay out. But he did tell the mandali that they were to assist the cooks and the servers at the wedding. And they could eat the vegetarian. So there was mixed. There was the regular good Parsi food, and there was good vegetarian food. But Baba, the way he was, inspecting everything. Oh, so you cooked this, you cooked that. And how did you cook this? Well, we cooked this like this. Oh, nice. And you cooked that? Yes. And you cooked this vegetarian food like that? Yes. And what ladles did you use? Well, how did you stir it? Oh, we used the same ladles. Okay. He told the mandali, you'll eat none of this food. So as the mandali were the servers of the food and assisting the cooks, they couldn't eat. And the Orthodox Zoroastrians and the English guests looked at them like they were pariahs. At the end of the whole thing, Ramju wrote, we attended the reception, but we were welcome neither as guests nor servants. This is a photograph. Around that time, maybe this is 1922. So this is Baba's brother Jamshed. And he married that first cousin Khorshid, Big Khorshid, so she was also now his wife. But she becomes one of the early women disciples, and here's Naja, also now one of the early women disciples. And this is Shireen Mai's eldest sister, Dawla, and her husband, Feridun. And this is Bailey. So these three here are on the memorial tower also, by the way. Naja, if I didn't mention it, had a brother named Aspandiar who was given the nickname Pendu. So now you see the link. Pendu, Masaji, Pendu, and Naja were absolutely dedicated disciples of Baba's. Next image, please. This is a photograph taken in Ghatkopar outside of Bombay on a trek from Bombay to Sakori in 1923. Not Sakori, they did go to Sakori. Baba didn't go into Sakori, he sent them in. Some of the people here This is Burjur Daiwala. He's on the memorial tower. Here's Adi. Here's Ramju, close disciple. He's on the memorial tower. This is Raghunath Karmakar. He's the daughter. You know, if you know the history of Upasya Maharaj, you know that he had a close disciple, Durgamai. This is the son of Durgamai. And he had kind of an ADD issue, had trouble listening. So Upasya Maharaj thought he'd send him with Meherabad to get a little discipline and training, but he couldn't quite pick it up. Anyway, he stayed through the years. He would come and go, but this is Gustaji, Gunny, both on the memorial tower. Rustam on the memorial tower. Behramji, who became Bua Sahib later, on the memorial tower. Nervous on the memorial tower. This is Slamson here, Baidul, Sarosh, Homi Vazifdar on the memorial tower, and Baba Ubale on the memorial tower. Next, please. This is the way Baba dressed during that period. This is before May 1924. So he would wear this long kurta and the pajama pant. That was his standard dress. This also was taken. These photographs from that period, we have, in 1923, we had two nice groups of photographs taken by fine photographers. One was the brother of Goher and Katie's father. He died within a year or two after he took his photographs. Those are the Quetta photographs. I don't have one of those here. And these are the Ghatkopar series that were taken by another Keki Irani, who is the brother-in-law of Sarosh. Next, please. This is a fine photograph. It was very well done. I think this was S.S. Dean who was called out. This event is Baba's birthday. Can you get it a little larger? Baba's birthday at Meherabad, first celebrated at Meherabad, February 18th, 1925. The figures are too small, so we won't get into that, except that you can see Padre here. Huh?
What's the building behind?
The building that you see behind there is the post office that was near the tracks that we have marked out. Directly across here, the path goes directly across here up towards the tracks. That was the post office. They had this veranda extended in this direction. And during the early years of Meherabad, that is from 1925, they started showing films here because Chanji had a cinema in Bombay. So Chanji and Naval would bring the equipment and project films on a sheet that was hung on this wall. Of course, all the films were spiritual theme films. So the history tells us what films they saw and when, what evenings and all that.
Silent films, right?
Silent films, 1925 and on. So even the early days of Meherabad, we had spiritually themed films. Just a few people I'll point out. Here's Massaji here. Mera is over here somewhere. I can't quite. Right there. Right there.
To your left.
Right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Mera, Franny, Franny, some of the other ones here. Here's Massaji here. I said, yeah, okay. Some of these people are on the memorial tower. You know what?
What?
Let me see. I think this is a backwards negative. Yes, it is. This negative is backwards. Okay. This image is backwards. Here's Concept Ferdun Massa.
Somebody's asking. Question.
Pardon?
Do you know who's in contact at his lab?
Pardon?
What the child is in contact at his lab?
That is Melu. That is Rustam's first son. Yes. Here's Adi Jr. Yeah, let's go to the next image. We can't see that much here. This very famous photograph was taken during 1925. My guess is that it was June 1925, before Baba started silence. Baba came here the end of January 1925 and informed people that he had plans to stay here. So when that happened, people started coming. That's when people started coming. And Baba stopped shaving. He didn't shave for 9 months. So we believe this was taken by Shah Studios in Ahmednagar, and we believe it was, I believe it was June 1925. We call that period the first long stay. Baba had specific work that he was accomplishing to prepare not only Meherabad. Remember, everything this avatar does is archetypal work, universal, that affects humanity in that contemporary time. Let's go to the next image. After Baba began keeping silence, he had this table cabin made. So you see the table cabin over there now. The original table cabin only had these woven bamboo panels. Baba you see him resting there with his left arm on the rail of the table cabin. So the next time you go past it, you can remember that he was resting his arm on that rail right there. The table cabin was first set beneath the neem tree by the Dunya. The reason the Dunya is where it is because the table cabin was there, and Baba officially moved his seat out to the table cabin in October 1925. The next month, the Dunya was established. That's not the original location for the Dunya, by the way. It was about 8 or 9 feet towards the northwest of this present location. Next image, please. This is a rare photograph, not a very good quality one, but it's really good because it shows Baba with the group of the Meherabad Mandali of the time and how happy they look, living this life of meager subsistence, but they're with him. I'm guessing that this building they're standing in was what was called the Dharamshala at the time, which was completed in September 25, so that pilgrims passing through would have some shelter. There was an addition some months later that we know better as Upasani Sarai, which was a separate quarters for women. I wanted to show you this because there are a few people in here that we don't have many pictures of, and one is this man here, Ajuba, the first disciple from Arangan, who was also the carpenter who was involved in the construction of so many things at Meherabad during the 20s. He was the main carpenter, and it was his responsibility to get the crews accomplish that work. But you have other ones. Here's Baba, of course. This is Arjun Supikar, another rare photograph. We don't have many of him. He's right here. Vishnu is here. Padri. Rauseb Afsari, another Kikusui, who's nicknamed now Rauseb. Not now, but within a year and a half, he was nicknamed Rauseb. Sailor, Kaka Shahane, who was the man who lived in Arangan in the family quarters there, where Baba would go once a week. On Thursday, Baba would bring the mandali to his place once a week on Thursday so that they could have tea with milk in it. Once a week.
You mean the older man?
This man here.
Yeah.
And while they were there, then Baba would give these discourses. and other places too, but mostly we know of them being recorded there. Baba gave a lot of discourses and fascinating information. So while everybody was revved up on caffeine, there was Baba giving these discourses. And most of these were given after he started his silence. And that would be during this period by writing on slates. So he had one attendant who would carry the slates around for him. And this man's job was to supply clean slates. Then one of the Mandali, usually Vishnu or Jal Adi, would read the slate. It would be translated into the languages for everyone to understand completely. Only then would Baba continue. In the meantime, if Chanji was there, that slate would go to Chanji, and he would quickly jot down everything, and then he would pass the slate to the attendant who would clean it and put it back in the stack. So this is how Baba would give discourses. Sometimes for 3 hours a day, if it was a fascinating thing and they didn't want to stop. All this work became known as what we have. The manuscript became known as intelligence notebooks. So it was published now as Infinite Intelligence. And Tiffin lectures, and those were the two main publications that have to do with those discourses Baba would give, sometimes in Arangan, sometimes here to the Mandali. Next, please. Yes.
What is the family name of Ajoba?
Ajoba? Pawar. But he was a Christian. Gangaram Pawar, but he was a Christian. And he was one of the early diarists also. Yes? You know where the health center is now? There was a duplex there where the entry of the health center is going towards Ahmednagar. There was a duplex there. There were also a number of a row of small rooms against the backside at that time. So during those early years, those were the facilities that were used. This is, as you know, this was maybe Mera's favorite. She would say it was her favorite. At least it was one of them. One day after Baba had a bath in 1926, October 17th, Ajal brought out Dean, the photographer, again. And this photograph was taken of Baba standing behind the Jopdi as his hair was drying in the morning sun. This area here would be where the Pilgrim Center is, where we're sitting now, in the background here.
Are there white rocks there?
No.
What are those?
White rocks is a modern invention.
What are those little?
These are barrels and things here. And I don't know what that stuff is there. That might be some farm stuff. I don't know.
Is it a line behind Bob?
Yeah. Don't know. So the Pilgrim Center is either this side or this side. But that was taken then. This is not, this has to do, those things probably have something to do with the orchard work. In front of the Pilgrim Center at that time, remember, the orchard had been established. And it grew well for about 12 years and then died out just as the trees were ready to give fruit, which was the story of Meherabad and the reason why Padre never wanted to plant a damn thing here. Next image, please. As Baba continued to stay at Meherabad during that first long stay, more and more people came to visit and to live here, to reside here. So the facilities had to be constantly expanded. At one point, there were 500 some residents here, and Thursdays and Sundays would be the busy days, where by 1926, there would be thousands coming on those days. So it was a real challenge for them to meet this demand. This photograph was taken on this east side of Hazrat Babajan School, if you've been across there, and what we're maybe going to call historic Meherabad Park, between the road and the railway. There was Hazrat Babajan School. It had 4 periods of construction and expansion. This would have been probably during the second period of expansion, and you can see the corrugated steel sheets were placed horizontally. That's why we know it is the Hazrat Babajan School. This was taken on the evening, about 7 o'clock, let's say, in the evening of, I believe, November 28th, 1925. As I think was a Thursday, so there were many people there. This was around the time that Baba did the dedication for Sai Darbar, which was another big gathering place there. What would happen is that so many people would come that the road would be blocked by the Jopdi. So they couldn't use the Jopdi as the seat anymore. They needed a big gathering place to accommodate all these visitors. That's why the Sai Darbar was built. That was an open building with a gable roof on it with trusses, 66 feet wide and 99 feet long. It's a big building, and it had a stage on the north side. In the future, even after Sai Darbar was deconstructed, it was sometimes reconstructed for certain events, or a version of it. It eventually became the place where Baba gave that message, work for the spiritual freedom of humanity, which is one of the discourses, published in the book Discourses. And it is from that same site, although not the original platform, not the original stage, where Baba gave his final declaration in 1954. It's an important site. So that's why we have the pipe barricade around it over there now, to preserve that site. Padre always wanted to rebuild that rock plinth there, so we hope to do that once all of this road work gets completed. Then we'll focus on the historic Meherabad Park and try and get those grounds groomed properly and really establish those important sites again. This photograph was used in one of the earliest publications, maybe the earliest publications, which was a Marathi thing that was put out for Baba's birthday in 1926. Let's go to the next image. So for Baba's birthday in 1926, for the first time, Baba wanted his birthday to be celebrated in a big way. And it went on for some days. The Mandali practiced the play, which was presented later. But on the official day, again, February 18th, 1926, they spent weeks preparing. Imagine water and toilets alone. So what happened is, from the very early morning, people started coming. And there was such a demand, and there were 12 buses and trucks running people back and forth constantly during the day. The Mandali, for the first time, realized this is a big crowd, and they spent the whole day doing crowd control by locking arms and creating a barricade around Baba so that people wouldn't mob him. There used to be these ceremonial baths that Baba allowed because it's part of a Hindu ceremony, and he allowed them to express their devotion. But it got to be so much at some point, and Baba caught a cold from too many of these baths. He said, please, please, stop this, slow this thing down. So it would, but on such days as this, he would have a ceremonial bath, and hundreds, maybe thousands, would be able to take part in that ceremonial bath. So Baba would sit on a stool, and just in his underwear, and people would go in with soap, perfume, water, mug. All the time they're singing, and if they could get to pour one mug of warm water and try and touch his body for 3-4 seconds, they'd be rushed by. And this would go on. At a certain point, after an hour or so, Bob would say, that's enough. Shut it down. Let's move on. This is how these things would work. On this day, then, Baba was carried to the Saidar bar, the new Saidar bar seat. There was a cabin that Ajuba built that Baba informed him a few days before he wanted a cabin. There had to be a certain size and had to be finished by his birthday. Ajuba and his crew finished that cabin a few minutes to midnight before the birthday. We have more photographs. I just don't have them with me. They're fascinating. I wish I could show you more, but this is all I have in a quick notice. On the day of Baba's birthday, no photographs were taken. Everybody was too busy. And they were so busy, nobody thought of who's got the camera. Where's the camera? So we don't have one photograph of that day. Baba gave darshan for most of the day. He was carried up the hill in a procession. He was carried back down, but immediately continued to give darshan till past midnight. Chandji writes in his diary that he believes that there were no less than 50,000 people who came to Meherabad on that day. Of course, they couldn't all have darshan, but he said at least they had the sight of Baba on that day. 50,000 people constantly coming and going, and they tried to feed everybody. So they ran out of food, but then they would be given an order. When the next truck comes back, we need another sack of rice, and cook as quickly as they could to supply people with something. This photograph was taken the next morning. We know it's that day, and here is Baba sitting with his back to the side of the table cabin. And we know it's that day because Mera said, this is the crown that she and Khorshid made for Baba's birthday that year. It was for that year. And that you can find up in the museum. And we know from the history that the reason these people are here is because all of them didn't have darshan. And the people were stubborn who didn't get darshan the day before, slept somewhere inside our bar or found a place overnight to stay. Baba had stopped giving darshan. The Mandali didn't sleep till 1 or 2 a.m. And then the next morning, Baba started again. So the people who lingered, Baba gave darshan till at least noon the next day. And this is the one photograph we have of that event, taken February 19th, 1926. Not a very good photograph, and I hope I get a better, clearer copy of it eventually, but it's important nonetheless. Next image, please. This photograph was taken January 11th, 1926, also at Shah Studio in Ahmednagar. The next day, Baba went to Pune with Rustam, Mera and Daulat Mai, few others, because Daulat Mai signed over the rest of her wealth to Baba. All of that money was used for a few things.
You need some more water.
Yeah, please.
No, we're going to bring him a bottle. Yep, you can take it there. Johan's bringing a bottle.
January 11th, 1927. So this is the first long stay officially ended November 1926. And that's when all of those monumental buildings, temporary construction, were demolished. All of that material was sold in an auction, which Concept Kaku organized here. And he also had to laugh because he realized that many of the things that were missing from his household were now being sold in the auction. Because his wife Gulnur would think, oh, Baba could use this there, so I'll bring it over there. So all of this stuff was resold. Now, so they had funding from what they sold, but Baba had an idea for the next stay at Meherabad. There was a 1 month, don't say hiatus from Meherabad. During that 1 month, and by the way, two of the main functions outwardly at Meherabad during what we call the first long stay were the establishment of the school, Hazrat Babajan School, and Meher Charitable Hospital and Dispensary. So the doctor who ran the hospital and dispensary, who had saved so many people from cases of pneumonia while he was here at Meherabad, contracted pneumonia and died a few days before Baba returned. No, on the day Baba returned. A few days before Baba returned, Arjun Supekar, the director of education, died. So those two main figures in the first long stay at Meherabad died a few days before Baba returned to Meherabad, the end of December 26. What was important about the first long stay is Baba doing that archival work for the whole universe, but also making the landscape spiritually for his future work here. He tolerated the caste differences at first in 1925. He allowed people to go on with their notions. Gradually he eliminated them. He made all the students eventually be in one school, not separate. So he allowed them to worship for a while in their own way. Then at one point, because of their kind of delinquency and devotion, he burned their temples. There were temples for both of them. He burned one and dismantled and demolished another one. This is not just teaching them a lesson. It had to do, these are all archetypal events. Gradually he merged the boys of all castes into one school. Yet the Mandali had separate kitchens for higher caste Hindus, and then there were all the rest. They even wouldn't drink the same water drawn by, only a Brahmin could draw the water from the well for them. But by the week before they left Meherabad, Baba allowed this very cleverly to go on, and he allowed it to work itself out, giving them the responsibility for the change. Even then, the people who were really his dedicated disciples, they didn't care about casteism. They were concerned about what would people think of him if he didn't do it. So Baba's comment to them was, when I make you judges, when I give you realization to make you judges, then you can give me advice. Up until then, that time you do what I say, and now here's the thing. So he set the rules the week before they left. Anyone here will eat the food prepared by one kitchen. We are all one now. The water will be drawn by anybody I say from the well. And he appointed some low-caste guy from Marangaon to do that work. And anybody who thinks they're going to stay with me must be willing to do any work I tell them to do. And you must trust that I understand what your capabilities are. Everybody was fine with that. Now there was no burden on their own individual. They were free of it. They were happy to have him as a master make that decision for them. But it was a very long process. So now Baba comes back to Meherabad in 1927, and another change happened immediately at the beginning of 1927. That is, Baba stopped writing the work for the book was completed the last week of December, where the table house had been shifted to a tree over here by the post office path. And Baba stopped communicating by writing. So within a few days, he started using that medium of communicating first by alphabet. He first started communicating by alphabets on a newspaper. And then Vishnu had these boards printed with the alphabet and numbers. And that's how Baba started so many years of communicating by an alphabet board. So here we are, 1927. Let's go to the next image. This is a photograph of Baba in March of that year. I believe this might be March 26, actually. Anyway, this dog was a dog given to Baba by Upasi Maharaj named Madari. Can you get it a little larger? No, it's too large. Okay. Okay. Baba is sitting in that ceremonial bath area, which was at that time set behind the table house. That means to the Arnagan side of the table house near the Dunya, this ceremonial bath was constructed. So this was Baba's dressing room and bathroom where he would get the ceremonial baths at the time. That dog, Madari, was given by Upasi Maharaj, and during we know this has to be before March of that year because the dog ran into traffic and was instantly killed under the wheels of a truck. And there wasn't much traffic here, but the timing was just right. The dog was run over by a truck. But this is one of those beautiful photographs. The dog Madari, by the way, knew whenever Arti was. When the Arti bell would be rung, this dog would rush and sit like that at Baba's feet. That's why this photograph was taken. Because this dog given by Upasi Maharaj was a real devotee of Baba's. Okay, next image, please. So, I mentioned that Baba went to Pune with Daulat Mai and Mera, and they signed over their wealth to Baba, and he used it for a few things. The first main purpose was when Baba returned to Meherabad in 1927, he was after one thing. He wanted to do a new ashram. He was increasing his depth of work with the children. What he wanted to do was give them spiritual training. He used that term, spiritual training. So Meher Ashram was started that year. And this photograph is the tank on the hill after it had been converted. We know this is after June 1927, or near the end of it, because the doorways in the end were cut June 19th, June 20th, like that. And this work was then, for the next few days, completed. These are many of the mandali lined up. This is Adi here, and Padri is over here, but you can't see them very well unless you have a close-up. But this gives you a good look at what the tank facility was here. This is the kitchen for Meher Ashram on the hill. The Meher Ashram began at the family quarters in Aurangam on May 1st. There were only 10 boys at the time. But through advertisement and people hearing that Meher Baba is giving a free education to boys, which was focused on spiritual training, they were overwhelmed with applications, so Baba needed a larger facility. The hill happened to be a perfect atmosphere for that. Let's go to the next image. So what I'm saying, going back to Mera and Daulat Mai's wealth, that was, at the time, I think 4 lakhs or something. Another thing they did with that wealth was start a school in Iran for poor Zoroastrian children in the name of Jahangir, Mera's father. at the same time, Meher Ashram was starting here. This photograph was taken at least September. I think this was actually, I think it was September 19th, because a photographer had come that day. This is the group of Meher Ashram boys then, sitting in front of the East Room. So when you go to the East Room on the hill, now we call this the East Tank Room. It's not the tank anymore because it has the doorway in it. So this is the East Tank Room. And there's Alaba here, one of the boys of the Meher Ashram. There are other ones in there, but it's difficult to see them. The Irani boys are in there. They had come and they were in the Meher Ashram here at the time. This was their dormitory at the time, right here. Before the increase in enrollment, this was the first dormitory. This is an important photograph for another reason. This is the first photograph we have that shows what was then the Crypt Cabin. So this was built, this Crypt Cabin was also built during that time when all this development on the hill to transfer Meher Ashram happened. Bobble wanted this Crypt Cabin, this cabin built on the far side of the hill. So people would approach the hill on, as you know, on that side, and then this was built here. So this is the first look at what you see there, the Crypt Cabin. Let's go to the next one. This is Baba sitting in the doorway of that Crypt Cabin. A rare photograph. Rare photograph. What happened is Baba began fasting. On November 20th, Baba began fasting. And he fasted for 5.5 months. 5.5 months. Much of that only on water. This is in the doorway. So Baba is in seclusion, and he rarely came out of that seclusion for weeks and weeks, but he would do this much. This is one of his positions. So he could speak to the mandali here. This is the front door. This is the original door of the Crypt Room, the Crypt Cabin at the time. Not even a Crypt Room yet. No, that's not the one that we see now. Where is the door? The door was stolen in 1933. I'll tell you about it in the later photographs. These stories are long, if we really get into them. The only way I could really tell these stories was to write a film script of the whole story of Meherabad. If Baba wants it, it'll come sometime. I'm up to the new life, and it's 186,000 words. I'm trying to keep it short, but the stories are too good to pass up. So striking that balance, you know, what is important and what is not, and giving a balanced picture of all these years that Meherabad is important. Next image, please. Now this is Baba sitting in the east window of the Crypt Cabin. He would put his legs out like this, and the visitors, Mandalian boys, would come and have his darshan here with his legs out. But all the while, he's still in seclusion, sitting inside. Pardon? This is, yeah, the east side, Mani's side.
Dear Mom, is
Yes.
it the same location as the window now?
Not exactly, but close to it. There was a platform here that was about 26 feet extending away from the Crypt Cabin. Yes?
Is it tin? Is that tin? What's it made of? Tin?
Oh, this is mostly lumber at this time. And I think this is like cardboard with little button caps holding it on. There's another window here. You see this? Now you can see in the original description, we know this because of Ramju's description of what the Crypt Cabin was at the time. This was a vented opening, so Baba could get air through there, but yet it was screened. So he could see out, people couldn't see in very well. But there was a larger window there that he would use to extend his legs out and give people darshan. As a matter of fact, I think Mansari used to tell us when she met Baba during this time, came to visit Baba, she remembered him sitting there with his legs extended. I don't know if you remember that story. This is where Baba would give the lectures to the boys. Now, so let's go back, recap the history. Baba started fasting November 20th. Then he went into seclusion into the Crypt Cabin a few weeks later. At the same time, he started a sadhak ashram. There were cells in a row to the north. To the north, that's towards Ahmednagar, to the north side of the Crypt Cabin. And there were 5 men of different castes and religions who were designated to be sadhak ashramites. They were to keep silence and be fed only milk and meditate. So they were in there. Simultaneously, the Meher ashram, now he's doing this, keeping himself, he's on silence already. Now he's fasting again. He was always fasting for some purpose or another. He's fasting again. And he's in seclusion. So what happened to the Meher ashram is that the boys began having deep inner experiences, spiritual experiences. Let's go to the next image. And this is a photograph of Baba with some of those boys in January 1928 now, inside the Crypt Cabin. Many of these boys were quite advanced according to Baba's description. Specifically this one here. This is Abdullah Pakravan, who came, wasn't interested in spirituality, but Baba wanted him in the Meher ashram. There were other ashrams here. There was called a branch ashram, and there were boys who were only interested in Hazrat Babajan High School then. The higher learning, it was a free education, so they'd come for that. But at a certain point, and that is December, it was December 10th actually, I believe, Baba merged all the schools into Meher ashram and had them all be on the hill. And the enrollment by that point was way over 100. The new dormitory for them was built under Rustam's supervision near what we now call the hospital compound, or the Must ashram on the hill. There's an area there. On January 11th, Abdullah Pakravan had 3 levels of experience. Gradually, first started in December. He had a certain level of experience. And then early January 6th, another level of experience. And everybody could see that he was not normal. Something had happened. His face, that boys describe his face as actually shining. On January 11th, it was in the evening when Baba raised him to the 6th plane, there on the east side of the Crypt Cabin. So these photographs were taken then. See, these are some of the other ones that are important. Raja Ram and Lobaji, Basant. You can read about them. The stories are unbelievable. Nobody would believe what was going on. In the meantime, Baba's mother, Shireen Maya, would also visit. And so she came up and saw all these boys would be weeping all the time. So she saw these boys weeping. Merog? What does this make them shut up? This does not look good, boys crying around you like this. Baba passed a rule that nobody is allowed up the hill, including my mother, unless I give permission from them. quite an amazing time. Simultaneously, Baba was getting a lot of trouble from the local Mughal Muslim community, who had many of their boys in the Meher ashram, and now it's not even Prem ashram yet. But now these boys, Baba would describe them as being deeply affected by Prem, love. Baba, around this time, had stopped giving the evening lectures. So the lectures created a mental atmosphere for the boys. Fascinating. This is the latest piece of work that Ward Parks, by the way, is editing and publishing. Lectures to the boys during this period. It's a short period, but it's fascinating what they were told. Bob had given up on the lectures. Now they're just amazing. Officially, January 1st, 1928, Baba called the Mandali up the hill for them to see. All the boys were wandering around weeping. But the relatives of the Mughal Muslims, specifically from Bombay, would come and remove their boys from the ashram. That's why Oliban had to leave. Oliban and his cousin had to leave because their family was affected by this slander and gossip that would be generated in their communities. So they would come and take their boys away. The problem was that none of these boys came here by accident. They had a destiny. They had a fate through many past lives that brought them. So Baba was working with them, and he had to have them do something. Oliver just simply told the story that the day before his uncle suddenly appeared to drag them away, Baba called him for the first time and said, read this, read that. He had Oliver read certain things out of his book. Oliver said he didn't know why. He was wondering why Baba made him read. And the next day he realized it was because his uncle was going to come and take him away. Very poignant stories. Really an incredible time. That's all I can say in a nutshell. Let's go to the next image. Because of the events of one of the important boys, Aga Ali, I don't know if you've heard of him or not. He was like the keystone. He was the archetypal keystone boy in Prem Ashram. He was taken away. And because of that, Baba came out of seclusion February 27th. And the next day, this photograph was taken. And Baba had been fasting now since November 20th. And so they dress him. Baba would allow the boys to do things that nobody else could do. They could put things on him, dress him up. Because of that, we have some of the best photographs of Baba taken in Toka, because he allowed them to dress him as Krishna, and this way and that way. They also had a habit of, there were a few of them that had gone so wild that they wanted to have a piece of him. So they would rip his coat apart. You know the comely coat with all the patches? Khorshid had done most of those patches, by the way, you see what it is now. Those were due to, not all the boys, but several of them, who had the habit of taking a piece. They wanted to get a piece of Baba, and they would sleep with that. So this was taken near that platform east of the Crypt Cabin, February 28th. This was the day when Baba went down the hill and met the women for the first time since his birthday. They only came up a few times. Mera's birthday, which was actually, he allowed her to come up on New Year's Day, and then his birthday. But his birthday wasn't happy because of this event with Ali. So Baba came out of seclusion, went down the hill, talked with the women, and Mera was sending him 2 cups of coffee with milk in it every day for some period. And Baba said, "Why did you send so little coffee?" "Baba, we send so much coffee every day." So Baba said, call Lahu, he was a young boy. You know, he's the father of Bapu, who works in the kitchen up on the hill. Called him. He was in charge of bringing the coffee to Baba every day from down here, where the women were staying in the bathing room there, to the hill. And he readily confessing, Baba, there was so much. I thought, well, I'll have half, you have half. And he would hide on the other side of the railway and drink half of Baba's coffee. So Baba's only comment was, all these weeks I've been having Lahu's prasad. Anyway, Baba said, a few comments he made about this period. I will never open up the tavern like I had in these past months. Never again will it happen. The boys will not lose anything, but the work has been disturbed, and I'll have to do it all over again. So it was for that reason that Baba relocated the whole ashram to Toka in 1928. Let's go to the next image. This is now later, after Baba completed his fast. Aspandi Arvasali told us that, after Baba came out of seclusion and fasting, he had to learn to walk again. He was so weak, and he had to spend some days just moving his legs again. And this is now probably in May 1928. This is the few weeks before they moved to Toka. I like this photograph because it shows us the Crypt Cabin here, this special room that was made for Chota Baba. Chota Baba was the name Baba gave to Abdullah Pakrawan, who he had raised to the sixth plane. That's his room here. And this, you can see the platform. This is that rare photograph of the platform to the east side, where Mani's grave is, of the Crypt Cabin. This is Erich's uncle Nashuwan Sata holding the umbrella here, the parasol. You can see how thin Baba is. After 5.5 months, he fasted 5.5 months for this work. And then after another break, he went to Toka and started fasting again to do the work again. But this time, it was more level, but he really did focus most of his time with the ashram boys, specifically the Prem ashram. And that went on until November. Let's check another one, please. This is Toka now. This is a rare photograph. This is Baba's cabin in Toka. So when they left Meherabad, they took everything, dismantled everything, lock, stock, and barrel. I believe these bricks that made this Toka cabin for Baba, this room, came from the bathing room where the women stayed. That was one of the original structures left from the World War I camp. And it was in mud mortar, so they could easily dismantle this thing and reuse the bricks. So remember, Baba's way was constantly to reuse things. Materials would always be reused, regenerated. So this is the way, and also what's interesting about this is you see, for the first time, we see this kind of a dome structure here. Now, Chanji's brother, Naroji, was dedicated to Baba by this time, and he also had involvement in this design. So they're doing a dome here. This cabin is still intact. It's there in Toka if you wanted to go. And Biff will probably bring you. Yes. Right. Let's go to the next image.
How far is Toka?
Oh, it's an hour.
Could you see a close-up of the last image?
Pardon?
Could you see the last image close-up?
This one?
Yeah.
Get it closer. Now let's go to the next image.
Is that the same door?
That's the same door. Here's an image of Baba standing. It's the way he looked, how thin he was in those years. Standing in the table cabin, by the way, was also brought to Toka. And Baba stayed in it until this was completed. And then he put Chota Baba in his table cabin. The table cabin was built to be kind of a camper. It was a building, a little structure that was portable. It could be picked up and carried by several of the men, put on a truck, and repositioned wherever Baba might like it. So think of it as Baba's camper. That's what the table cabin was. There's an interesting thing here. You recognize that door?
Oh, the one which was locked?
This is the door, I believe, I'm quite sure, that is now the door of Baba Samadhi. When they left, they didn't leave this door, it was too valuable. So when we go and see it now, there's an iron grate there that was put on the room, but the original door is not there anymore. So Ralph asked, what happened to the door? In 1933, while Baba was away and the Mandali were mostly in Nasik, thieves came and took the door of the Crypt Room. The Crypt Room happened in 1929. The Crypt Cabin, many stories, how to tell you, we don't have enough time to get into all of these. But the Crypt Room was the reconstruction of the Crypt Cabin. And that happened after a specific event. But the reconstruction was of soft rock that wouldn't hold up, but it was there nonetheless. So that Crypt Room, because it's now rock walls, we call it Crypt Room, had that original door, and it had a roof, and it had planks over the pit. These thieves came and took everything they could of any kind of value. The Baba had a follower named Satyamung, who was a notorious thief and villain in this area until he met Baba in 1925. It's a fascinating story. We don't have time to get into it. But Baba called him and said, you find out who these people were. You'll know these people. You find out who they were. So he went to his own gang and said, Meher Baba says, so you people know something about this crime that was committed. You took his crypt room material. One of them shouted, how do we know you didn't do it and you're trying to blame us? So immediately thought, this must be the guy who did it. Okay. Says, here's what we do. We go to the Dunya. We both take the ashes of the Dunya into our mouth and we say, whoever has committed this crime will die in 1 week. The guy's name was Fakira. Do you agree? He said, yes, what is there? I'll agree to do that. So he did it. And the guy died in 6 days. 1933, Baba sent Pendu here to do new work on the hill because now Baba wanted to shift the women's ashram to the hill. It was a perfect site for what he had in mind for the women's ashram, which had to do with isolation, quietude, privacy. So in 1933, Pendu came back, and that is the time when they also repaired the Crypt Room. This door was saved, and it was a good quality door, taken from the Toka ashram. And that door was what was used to rebuild. And we can see in the later photographs that yes, indeed, there was a rebuilding of that door entry in the front. The mortar doesn't match. The new mortar is different from the original. So we know this happened. The repair was done. And that's a fascinating thing. And also typical of how Baba And the mandali would recycle materials. We're almost at 6 o'clock, but I want to give you all an opportunity to ask any questions you might have. Yes?
You were talking about the caste system, how Baba
Yes.
eliminated that caste system among the Mandali people.
Mhm.
Before the Brahmins were drinking water from the pulling out water from the
Mhm.
well, then I think Baba asked Mang and Harijans.
Mhm.
So I want to know, this Mang is that same Mang who was a thief?
No. You know, Hmong is just a caste.
Okay, that's a caste.
Just a caste, Mahar and Hmong. And even in our time, there were local people, Nugger people, not Arangam people, but Nugger people, who would refer to Baba as Mahar Baba. Yeah. Not a Hindu, Mahar Baba. He was working with those. There were many stories of people coming here. Couldn't break free of their casteism. They were attracted to Baba, obviously, was something, but they couldn't. You see all of these personalities, Gilori Shah, Pasi Maharaj even, Sai Baba specifically. They were beyond all religions and castes and things. Oneness was the thing. Oneness was the thing. It was difficult for religious people to grasp that. Now, Biff.
The current Samadhi, two questions. On the door of the Samadhi are elephant cards.
Yes.
Why are they there?
Well, I believe they're from the original. That was we can't see them in this photograph, but there are some other photographs that will show that. It's a traditional thing. We see them in the old doors. I don't know where this door originally came from. You know? The what? The light. Oh, yes. So you know why it's there. Originally, Charlie Morton did that painting. And originally, the intention was that it was going to be stained glass. And it took Charlie Morton years and years to even get the painting done. So when he brought the painting, Mera and Mani were so impressed, and they were really concerned that is he even going to finish the stained glass before he even dies. So they said, we really like this painting. We're satisfied. We'll just leave the painting and not the stained glass.
So the light's not from Baba's time?
No, the light, the purpose of the light was to shine light through the stained glass. So it ended up there in preparation for that, never used for that.
Peter, is that the door you were saying, those little, the brass?
Yes. You might see a little bit of it right there. Right there. Yes. See one of those? The other photographs are more clear. Yes, Steve?
I have a question because you said that after he would do his fasting and come out of seclusion, he had to learn how to walk again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would there be any time he went into seclusion, did his work and came out, and he actually had to maybe get medical help because of the fasting and the atrophy and just...
In later years, Baba had constant medical help, but it was due to the general breakdown of his health and the exertion of his, the injuries, spondylitis in his neck from bowing down to musts and sadhus thousands and tens of thousands of times. He spent his body in this work. He spent his body doing this.
And also going back to the thief, is that the same thief that you had told that story where he did one more job and Baba?
That's it. Same guy.
Same guy?
Mhm. Same guy.
6 o'clock. We're going to have to stop.
We have to stop at 6 o'clock.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Peter.
coming.
Very much.